Now, of course, this week we had a major ruling that will have consequences for future elections. I'm talking about the Voting Rights Act being gutted in a 5-4 decision. Now, those who voted to strike down Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act were, of course, Chief Justice John Roberts, Antonin Scalia, Anthony Kennedy, Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito. Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion, and he basically based his ruling off the 10th Amendment of states' rights. Of course, the question is whether the Act's extraordinary measures, including its disparate treatment of the states, continue to satisfy constitutional requirements. And this was from the majority opinion. As we put it short time ago, the Act imposes current burdens and must be justified by current needs. Now, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, 13 states had voter ID laws in the books, and as many as 41 states introduced restrictive voting laws leading up to the 2012 election, including Pennsylvania, Texas, South Carolina, and Wisconsin were among those that passed voter ID laws that were delayed by state and federal courts. So obviously we had some effect from the Voting Rights Act from Section 4 that were in effect for the 2012 elections. And the other argument made against the Voting Rights Act is that, quote, times have changed. The formulas that govern singling out one state from another for different treatment, which once made sense, have lost their relevance. Now, Clarence Thomas, he said he would have gone further and gotten rid of Section 5 altogether. Now, in the wake of Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act being repealed by the Supreme Court, Texas immediately enacts voter ID laws. They couldn't wait. They couldn't wait. Mississippi and Alabama also started moving to enact new voter ID laws, and North Carolina is expected to move towards passing laws restricting voting before the 2014 midterms. The other thing to mention is that the formula for Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act has been shifted over to Congress. And there may still be some hope, because of the fact that the Voting Rights Act has been voted on by Congress so many times in a row by such a large margin.
Obviously, this is racially motivated. I mean, it can't not be, because there really is no other reason to get rid of this particular clause, because it's inactive unless it's necessary. It's preventing something. It's not. We're not taking any money. It doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't cost us any time or effort. It's simply to prevent injustice from taking place. I mean, it's like Stephen Colbert was saying that taking away the Voting Rights Act. He was saying that.
What was it that Justice Ginsburg had written?
That's right. Justice Ginsburg said that taking away the Voting Rights Act is like throwing away your umbrella because you're not getting wet when it's raining.
Yeah, it's obvious that we still needed the Voting Rights Act, and for them to come out and say that no, times have changed. We don't need that anymore when we just needed it in this last election.
And it's only been around. It's only been on the books for
since
50
1965.
Years. Yes, so for 50 years it's been on the books, and supposedly in 50 years' time since the civil rights movement, racism is eradicated in this country. Really?
Good job, America.
That's the argument.
We win.
That's the argument. The Supreme Court.
No, not really. Racism is not over. It's pretty obvious. I mean, it's tying it into kind of Paula Deen.
And this doesn't even just affect African Americans anymore, because if they take away this clause, that already, Texas and I'm sure Ohio will get on the bandwagon as they did before, trying to pass voter ID laws and restrict early voting. So this doesn't just affect African Americans. I think 20% of the African American population don't have IDs, but there's also the elderly that don't have current IDs. There are college students that only have their college identification or whatever, and they don't typically have ID unless they also have a driver's license.
Okay, so let me jump in here. So you've got students You've got poor seniors and just poor people in general. Who do they generally vote for?
Old people vote Republican.
Not always.
I know, but
not always. You ever heard of something called the AARP?
yeah, but I think the Voting Rights Act falls into a special category for me, and it's one of those categories of something that's needed, but it's actually not really constitutional when you look at it. Like, I actually agree with the ruling. Like, what was struck down was the federal government's ability to to prevent state laws from going into place.
No,
So
what the clause is about is that states have an obligation to prove that any new voter laws that they put in place are not meant to be discriminatory in any way.
And
There's
only
nothing
certain
unreasonable
states
about that.
Formula.
I
Certain states that have a history of discrimination when it comes to voting.
But I understand what you're saying, but it basically it's to me it's more of a like technical legal issue. Like, usually the person that, in order to stop a piece of legislation, somebody has to be harmed after the fact. Like, this is a way to like
exactly, the damage is already done.
That's the problem with this, is that the fact that you have to have an election first. And what are they going to do after? Because okay, so you've got, say, Mississippi, right, under this new law. You've got Mississippi that enacts these voter ID laws that disenfranchise a lot of people. Or actually, no, let's not go with Mississippi. Let's go with Florida. Okay, Florida's more of a swing state, and it matters in national elections. Okay, so you have Florida doing this, and they tried. Trust me, they tried during the 2012 election, but they actually go through with this, disenfranchise millions of voters, and suddenly you get a Republican president instead of a Democratic president, right? And we've actually had stuff like that happen.
And even if a bunch of those people sue and actually are able to prove that they were disenfranchised, then what? Are we going to have another election?
Republican president.
No, that's
not
not
only
going to
that,
happen.
but you're going to have the state itself going to court. How many years will that take? How long will that take to prove?
But I mean, it's unfortunate because that's literally the way our system is supposed to work. Is that the government does something wrong, people withstanding sue the government and overturn it. The Voting Rights Act was necessary, I'll go ahead and say it, but if you look at the way it works and you try and combine it into the Constitution, it doesn't work. It's a pre-crime. So I understand like the legal arguments.
I disagree. I don't think it's a pre-crime because only with states that have actually done something wrong in the first place have to go and get pre-clearance. So it's not a pre-crime. It's an until you can prove, according to this law, unless you can prove that you no longer have any sort of or that you can no longer have discriminatory practices in your state, because you can get off the Voting Rights Act, the Section 4. There is a way that you can prove that you no longer need to be on Section 4. And these states haven't proved it. Instead, they decided to go to court and say, we're not going to try and prove that we're going to be fair in elections. Instead, we're just going to go to the court.
And I understand that these laws are aimed at minorities and these laws are wrong, but I'm just saying from a legal technical point, the Voting Rights Act isn't a constitutional way to change those laws. Like, those laws have to be challenged individually, in my opinion, and overturned in the courts if need be.
You see, I think that would be a waste of effort and time and money.
It is a waste of time. It does take longer, but it's a more constitutional way. I think it's an actually constitutional way. Is that somebody's wrong, then they have standing, then they sue, and they try and get it overturned. But I know Danny wants to jump in, so go ahead.
Ideally, what you're saying, it being unconstitutional, is true. The problem that we have is that it's not mostly aimed at minorities. It's aimed based on poor districts. It's easier to vote in a wealthier district or an upper-class district. When it comes to a lower-class district, the voting lines are insanely long. They want to prevent the poor from voting, basically it. You just want to prevent the fucking poor from voting.
Well, you remember Paul Weyrich, okay? Paul Weyrich, the Goo syndrome, right? He said, as a voting populace...
Was he the founder of the Heritage Foundation?
Well, he said, as the voting populace goes up, our chances of winning go down. And remember that Tea Party activist had also said, we don't want black people to vote if they're going to vote for Democrats. Well, who votes
They only
for...
represent 13% of the population.
Right. But I understand that. I understand that they're bad guys, right? But I'm saying that they're technically, in my opinion, they technically have the correct constitutional argument that the federal government is abridging their state's 10th Amendment rights by making them have to clear what they do with the federal government beforehand.
Why not just give everybody a month to vote?
I don't think that's true at all, and I think that it's a lot more vital that we protect our constitutional right to vote.
But why are you setting it up?
That's a constitutional right.
That is a constitutional right. And
yeah, we do need to. But unfortunately, the different states have these fucked up laws, like it was in Florida back in 2012, is that they had people freaking standing in line all freaking day by the hundreds. Why not just set, and that was mostly because of Rick Scott, but if they can set it up so that...
They don't want people to vote.
They just don't want people to vote. If we can have, like, a freaking month to vote, we wouldn't be talking about this Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, I know that they don't want people to vote, and all that, everything you're saying is true, but what I'm saying is
this is why you need Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act.
Because
if they continue to try to
why not just give everybody a month to vote?
It's true that they're trying all those things. All that is true, but what I'm saying is that in the like elections are, even federal elections are handled locally, and Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act says that everything is handled locally except for you states in these circumstances, and that's what they were challenging. And they, on a technicality, it sucks, in my opinion, are right on 10th Amendment grounds. I don't mean they're morally right. I just mean that in the constitutional way to challenge voting rights or voting laws is after the fact, and that's unfortunate, but it's true.
All right, this is why I'm glad that the Constitution is a living document that can be amended to work. It can be, because we've added a lot of amendments throughout the years. If you were a strict constitutionalist, you would throw out all the amendments and say we're just going to stick with the original thing.
Well, the Constitution allows amendments in there. I don't agree that it's a living document, but I do agree that it's amendable because it's amendable.
That's the whole reason. That's the whole definition of a living document.
Yeah, that's what it means.
No, a living document means that you change the way you interpret it. If
we're arguing semantics,
I know.
Aren't we? Okay.
I don't think so, but okay.